Hi everybody, so today we're going to talk about for loops in Python. And so a for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. So unlike while loops, with for loops we know exactly how many times it will loop when we write the code. Whereas with a while loop, it could loop once, it could loop 10 times, it could loop 100 times, depending on when that condition is met. So iterate, when I use that word iterate, it means you are running through items in a list. So for example, if I were to iterate through the word hello, then I would start with H and then go to E and then go to L and then go to L and then go to O. And that's iteration. So with a for loop, we can execute a set of statements, once for each item in a list or a tuple or a set, and go from there. So before we talk more about for loops, I want to talk about the range function in Python. So the range function allows you to find the range of some certain value, and it can be used in three different ways. So option one would be that it takes one parameter, so the parameter would be the stop value. And if you don't give it a start value, it assumes that you want to start at 0. So range 10 would return all the values from 0 all the way up to 9, not including 10. So it goes up to but not including 10. Another option for range is to start at some value and then stop at some value. So this is called an overloaded function because you can have the function take one parameter. You can also have the function take two parameters, and yet it still has the same name, range. And so for this example, it starts at some starting value and it stops at some stop value. And so here it would give me all the numbers from 3 up to but not including 10. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 would get returned here. Option 3 would be if you gave the range function 3 parameters, start, stop, and step. And so the start is what you're starting with, the stop is what you go up until, and then the step would be what you're stepping by. So the default step is 1, so if you don't include it, they assume it's 1. But if you do include it, then you can count by whatever you want. So 3, 5, 7, 9, because here we're counting by 2's starting from 3. 90% of the time, you're just going to be using the range function with option 1. You're just finding the range of some integer value, and that's it. And so that's what we're going to be doing a lot with our for loops. So now we can use the range function along with a for loop to repeat something some number of times. So the first type of for loop we're going to talk about is a loop that just does something some number of times. So here, this first function says for n in range 10, so that's going from 0 up to but not including 10, we're going to print hello. So this means we just want to print hello 10 times, but yet we don't want to have to type it 10 times. So I'm going to actually execute this over in the code pad. So let me move this over. And so let's first start by saying for n in range 10. And then you indent, because anytime after a colon, you're going to indent. And then if I say print hello, then hello will get printed 10 times because it goes in range 10. 0 is included, so that's still 10 times, even though it doesn't include 10. Yeah, and then the next option, so let's move this over now. So the next option is if you were to add to some value x, right? So if we said like x is 1, and then you could do a for loop saying for a in range 10, x plus equals 2. So plus equals 2 means take x what it was originally, so it was originally 1, and set it equal to itself plus 2. So the next value of x would be 1 plus 2 is 3. Then the next value of x would be 3 plus 2 is 5, and et cetera, up to range 10. So now let's try that in the code pad. So if I did x equals 1, so I still have to declare x, and then I say for a in range 10, x plus equals 2, and print x. And so here you can see 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and it goes on from there. So one thing I want to mention here is that this variable, this a or n, these are temporary variables, and they're just like variables that are placeholders in the loop. Meaning that, like, you could call this variable whatever you want. You can call it a, you can call it x, you can call it n, you can call it b, whatever you want. And this just is a placeholder for like whichever value you're on. So for example, if I wanted to repeat for the range of 10, then n would start at 0, then n would be 1, then n would be 2, then n would be 3, then n would be 4, then n would be 5, etc. And same thing for a. So you can call it whatever you want. The next way that we can use a for loop is to repeat for some length of a list or a string. So if I want to repeat throughout the entire length of some string value, for example, for I in range length word, print word bracket I. So a lot of times with a for loop, we will use the variable I. And I, in general, will stand for index. And we know that strings and lists have index values. So when we use something like I in range length word, then what that does is I is going to start at 0 because the length of word, whatever it is, so say it's a word that has 10 characters, then it would start at 0 and would go up to 9. And then if we print word bracket I, we will first print the first letter, the word at bracket 0, which would be the first letter of the word, then word at bracket 1, which would be the second letter of the word, etc., etc. So now over in the code pad, let's try this out. So here, if I say word equals computer, and then I said for I in range length word, print word bracket I. And so what that will do is it'll print C, then O, then M, then P, just all in their own lines. Now say instead I wanted to, say I didn't want to print the letters, say I wanted to print the index values, then I could do something like this. For I in range length word, print I. I don't know when you would want to do this, but as you can see here, if you just print I is just the actual numerical index values from Word. So 0 all the way to 7, because computer, C-O-M-P-U-T-E-R, is 8 letters, so it goes up to index 7. All right, moving on. The third way that we can use a loop is you can modify variables. So for example, you could have some integer value like x, and say we want to add 5 to it over and over and over again as many times as we wanted. So we could take x, which whatever it is, And we can add 5, then add 5 again, then add 5 again, then add 5 again, then add 5 again, over and over and over again, 20 times. We could print it each time, and then we could return it at the very end. So if we return the value at the very end, this ends the function, meaning that the function can't have anything underneath this. So we can only return once for every condition. Here's another example of how we can modify a variable using a loop. So say I have a string called word, and then I set some new word equal to an empty string. Then we could loop through the original word, and then we can add the letter from word to a new word plus a dash. So what that will do is it'll put a dash in between each letter of the word and then return the new word. Okay, so now let's try doing some coding that problems. So for the first one we're going to do, it's called front times. And so what we're doing here is we are given a string and a non-negative integer n, and we'll say that the front of the string is the first 3 characters, or whatever there is in the string up to 3. And we want to return n copies of the front. So what that means is that if it's chocolate, then we want to return CHO however many times, so n times. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get a string that contains only the first 3 letters of the string. So maybe we could say something like, take str, which is what it was originally, and set it equal to str, and then we want to take a substring of that string. So we want to start at 0 and go to 3 because we want to include index 0, 1, and 2, up to but not including 3, and that'll give me the first 3 letters of str. So I'm just resetting str to just the first 3 letters of str. After that, then I am going to repeat this word n times. So in order to return some new string, I need to make a new string. So I can say something like result equals, let's set it equal to an empty string because I'm going to add on to this string later on. And so now I'm going to loop through the number of times that I want to loop. So that would be n, right? So I could say something like for x in range n, because I want to find the range. So for example, if n is 3, then I want to do it 3 times. If n is 10, I want to do it 10 times. So if I say for x in range n, then notice that it auto-indents for me. And then here I can say something like result equals result plus, so it started with an empty string, and then I'm going to add onto it. I'm going to add str. Remember that str is only the first 3 letters. So now I take itself, which was originally an empty string, and I add the first 3 letters. Then I loop again. When I loop again, then it's already going to have the first 3 letters, and then it's going to add another set of the first 3 letters. After the for loop executes, so let's unindent now. Now we're going to return result. Now result is just the variable that holds the result. We could have called that anything we wanted to. All right, and so we got it all right, and great. The next one we're going to do is molt list. And so for molt list, what this does is it's going to take 2 parameters, a number and then the number of times. So we want to return a list of all the multiples of some number from 0 up to times. So for example, list 7, 5 will return all the multiples of 7 up to 5, like it'll make it a list of 5 of them. So it starts at 0, then it goes 7, 14, 21, 28, and once the list has 5 items in it, then it returns it. So another example would be 3, the multiples of 3, and we want to make a list that's 8 items long. So it starts at 0, then 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, because we have 8 items in this list. Okay, so what do I need to do? Well, first I need to make a list and start that list with nothing in it. So I'm gonna call this result again because I think it's a nice variable for like what we're gonna finish with. And originally our result is gonna have nothing in it. And now I'm gonna loop. So how many times do I want this loop to run? I want this loop to run as many times as times, right? So here I can say something like, well, I want it to loop some number of times. So I'm just going to pick some random variable n for n in range times. And that's because I want to do it some number of times. So this value is always how many times you want to do something. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the multiplication of the number, so num, times whatever value I'm at. So for example, n, let's see, what's happening with n right now? Well, with the first iteration of the loop, n is going to start at 0. Then n will go to 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, etc. So that means that we can use the variable n to try and calculate the multiplication values. So here, I can say something like result dot append. Remember that this means that you're adding something to a list. So we do result dot append, and then here we can do like, well, n holds the place starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the number is what we want to multiply by. So we could do number times n. And then we need to return result. So when we return, then let's double check, make sure we're all right. And we are, and that's it. So again, I'm taking my original list, make it empty, and then I'm going to add to that list how many times? However many times it tells me to. So for example, if we want to do it 5 times, then this is going to loop 5 times, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So first it's going to be the number times 0, then it'll be the number times 1, then it'll be the number times 2, then it'll be the number times 3, then it'll be the number times 4, and then it will spill out of this for loop, and it will return this unindented value result. And that's it. So we're going to talk a lot more about this on Tuesday in class.